Hello everyone and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I will be showing you how to create a registration form and how to also create a login form. And then we'll allow users to be able to register for our application using SQLite, SQLite, and to also log in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new project, as you can see from my screen. And then I am going to select an empty activity. Then I am going to call this user login or user registration or user login SQLite or SQLite. And then I'm going to leave my package the way it is. You can change it wherever you want to save it to. And the language I'm going to use is Java. I'm going to leave the API, the minimum SDK at 5.0. And I'm going to click on finish a project for me. When it's finished, we'll get. Okay, so if you're new to Android Studio, you see on the left-hand side that you have these folders. Now, the manifest file has some information about the application. We're not going to look into the manifest file now. And then we also have our Java file, which will contain us. In the resources folder, you see durable, which is where your images will go to, the layouts of each activity that you would have. And then we have bitmap, we also have values. We're creating a user and registration application. So what we need to do, we know that, okay, when login form for them to log in, and then also a button that will take them to the registration form in case the person is new to the application. So what first we're going to do is Android Studio Searcher. What Android Studio does for you is it gives you the opportunity to be able to create your a layout either using a graphical user GUI, or you can write it in code yourself, and the code is in XML. So creating our layouts in XML, for those of you, is a good tool to have, because and then you can also split it where you have your design, or you can use the design so that you'll be able to see how you can interchange between them and use them whatever you want. Now on the left hand side, we have a palette right onto your screen. Point 3 now on your application, you'd see that it will show you default. Android Studio gives you a constraint layout. There are several layouts that you can use. If you click on layouts here, you see that we have a constraint layout, we have a linear layout, we have a vertical layout, frame layout, table row. I usually prefer to use the linear layout, vertical one, but depending on the application I'm creating. If you click on legacy, you see grid layout as well, and a relative layout. Legacy components are old components that maybe in the next few years they might not be using anymore. They introduce new ones. So grid layouts, relative layout, type host, list view, grid view. But we're going to be used for the purpose of this tutorial. It don't really matter. I'm going to be using some of these. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my code, XML code, and I'm going to change my. So the first thing I'm going to do is create, for this first video, is I'm going to create our login layout. So I'm choosing the linear layout, and when you're using your code, you see these code here. Don't be too nervy, don't get too overwhelmed. They are basically the attributes that you're going to have, and I'll show you how. For my linear layouts, because linear layouts comes in two types, we have the vertical and the horizontal. So that is the orientation. You have to choose the orientation whether to have a vertical or horizontal. So, but for mine, I'm going to make it into a vertical, and I'm going to use the attribute of orientation. And then by default, Android Studio creates a text view for us. I'll be using a text view, so I'll leave the text view design section, and I'm going to show you how you can also drag stuff onto your screen. So I'm going to click on text. Now, when you click on text, you'll be presented with several options. We have a text view, which is basically like a label. We have a plain text, which is an import, where the user can enter any plain text into. We have a password field. We have a password. So these are edit texts, we call them, that Android Studio gives you the opportunity to have. I'm just going, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to use the plain text. I'm not going to use anything else, just the plain text at the top here. And you see that the plain text, we need a username and a password. We're going to use email address and a password rather. And then and drag a button to the screen. I'm going to drag another button onto the screen. The reason why we are having two buttons is because one button will be for login and the other button registration page. This is what we have so far. Let me delete one. I think the code was running slow, so I ended up adding an extra one, which is not needed. Okay, so this, you can see here that we want to give each button an ID. Why do we need to give an ID? Because without an ID, we'll not be able to have a reference to use it in the code, to code it in such a way that will add a functionality to that edit text. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each and every single one of these components here, or views here, an ID. So I'm going to click on the first one, and on the right hand side of your Android Studio, if you're using the design section, you'll be able to see that they give your component or view some attributes, which is similar to the code. So these are all attributes. So if you look inside this code section, you would see that we have our edit text here, and these are the attributes relating to that edit text. I'm going to use the design section so that you'll be able to know how to also do it in the design section. So this first one is called edit text person, but I want to call it EDT email address. And I'm going to add log to it, because in case in my application I end up having an EDT registration, I will add a reg to it so that it can differentiate between the different IDs that we'll have. So EDT on refactor. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change the text. I don't want this text to be here, because if you leave this name in the text there, whenever the user clicks on the edit text to input their email address, it will always start with a name. So I don't want that. What I really want is a hint, because the hint acts like a placeholder. So the minute you start to type in, it is. When I click out, you'll be able to see the email address. Alternatively, if you want to change these information, you don't need the design section. When you use the code, email address from EDT text person, etc., whatever it was, to EDT email address log. Now, the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this log, and then I'm going to give it a password. I'm going to say password, and then for my button, let's just say BT. It's going to appear is login, and then register log, and then the button, I'm going to change it. And then my text view, I'm going to change, I'm going to give my text view an ID, finish it off. I'm going to give the ID of this to TXT, because I like to name all the text views I use to display information to the user, this TXT display info. So I'm just adding login so that I know that this one is for the login. So this is our layout, and here you'll be able to see that this is for our login. In the code, I can take away the hello and then check out the design, and this is how our login page will look like. I mean, I can give it some margin padding to be central, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not going to worry too much about bringing things down. We'll do that in a later tutorial. If you see here in the component tree that Android Studio would give you some exclamation marks. If it's a red one, it means that, listen, this one is serious, so take it serious. Android Studio would increase whatever is missing there for me. So what it's saying is that the item may not have a label, but we're not giving any information label. We don't want it to have any label anyways. So any information in the label anyway. So we'll leave it just like that. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to run my application. We've created an activity. We've created a login form, which is going to be on our main activity. Main activity means it's the first screen or activity that we'll see. So to run your application, Android Studio has a built-in emulator, which you can use to run your application. Now, you can create an Android virtual device, which would mimic a real mobile phone. So you get to choose which kind of platform you like to create for. To do that, there is an icon, if you can see on my screen, called an AVD Manager. If you click on AVD Manager, you'll be able to create a new Android virtual device, which would be able to show your application for you. Or if you click on this arrow here, usually you would not have this Pixel 4 API 30. The only reason why I have it is because I already got an Android virtual device created already. But usually if you click on the arrow, I can click on, but regardless, I'm just clicking on this one just so that you'll be able to see. You'll be presented with this screen. Ignore this here because I already have one created. It's letting me know that I already have one created. Guys, a window will pop up, and then you'll be able to choose which hardware you would like to run your application on. So you have different categories. You can either use TV, phone, Wear OS, tablet, automotive. By default, Android Studio has already picked Pixel 2 for me. But if you want to change which Android mobile phone that you want to code run your application on, you can choose whichever one you want here. I'm just going to leave Pixel 2. Then I'm just going to click on Next. Now, when I click on Next, you're presented with several system images. In my case, that's why I don't need to download it again. But if you're a first-time user who is trying to create an Android virtual device, you would need to click on whichever one you like to download and download it. I went for the R, but you can go for the Q, the Pi, the Oreo, Nougat, whichever one you would like to go for. But I chose the R. And then when you click on Next, you'll be able to change the name of your virtual device. And you can also change the startup orientation. If you go back to the previous page, sometimes when you're doing it, when you're downloading, it might take some time. You may have a bit of issues. Some Android, some laptops have some issues with installing system images. So Android Studio actually provides you, if it fails to install it for you, it will provide you with a GitHub link for you to follow that tutorial to install it. You might have to go into your BIOS settings to do that, but Android Studio will provide you some. And then I'm not going to click on finish because I've already done mine ready. So I'm just going to run my application now. To run your application, once you've installed your Pixel or your device, your hardware device, if you just click on this play button, it would run this app. You see down here, it says Gradle build running, and build the application for you.